Thank you all so much. I have to just start by saying that this is an ultimate career highlight. I've worked in public libraries since I was 17 years old. So, y'all, more than 30 years. And I've yet to get an opportunity to speak with an author in this kind of a venue. So, thank you, Friends Foundation Watermark, for letting me have this career highlight. I think this year, as Lynn mentioned, we're celebrating Wichita Public Library. We're celebrating our 150th year. You guys, since 1876, you have had a public library institution that's making sure that you have resources, you have opportunities for programs like this, that you have a spark of joy in your life. And we are, in many ways, the same institution we were in 1876, if you can believe it. We look the same, right?
Fewer bustles.
Thank you. And in just as many ways, we've entirely transformed. What's endured really is our purpose. What's evolved is how we live it. Today, perhaps our most essential roles are these: to spark joy in reading and to serve as a safe, welcoming space for every member of our community. And I'll confess that when I first started reading the Astral Library, and I shared this with Kate before, so she's not going to be surprised, I kind of got a little miffed. You captured us librarians a little bit too well. Every quirk, every quiet intensity, every fiercely guarded corner of our world, you nailed it. But once I recovered from feeling so seen and thoroughly seen, I realized that there was something deeper, that the stereotypes of librarians, it's well earned and well deserved. And yes, and we were also just honored. You honored us in your hands. You've rendered the work as something really luminous. In your story, sanctuaries are tended by the greatest helpers in our universe. And what a breathtaking metaphor for us librarians and for the spaces that we protect. I thought maybe a first conversation we could start with is have a feeling that you might know a little bit more about librarians than the average writer. Tell us about your relationship with the library.
Well, I was really lucky because I grew up as a library kid. My mother was a librarian. She's retired now. And so therefore I grew up running around libraries. I was, the kid who was, I had a library card application slapped down on the counter the minute I could, awkwardly crayon my name on the application. I was running up double-digit fees, because I never got my books back on time. I knew how to sneak into the adult section and get the adult books out that I wasn't supposed to get and slip those in with the Saddle Club paperbacks and the Babysitter Club books. And that was just my playground growing up. And the love of story, the love of libraries, it's very much something I was raised with. And yet I also got the behind the scenes view of it growing up. I saw the way, my mother would come home frustrated with bureaucracy in libraries. Oh, I'm seeing the nods. You know what I'm talking about. And, the way that sometimes the people who are making decisions on high about libraries are people who seemingly had never read a book and have no idea what libraries are supposed to do. Not all of them. I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush here, but enough of them to cause librarians headaches. And so these are the things I've grown up with. And there are so many things that, I love about libraries, from the smell to, the way that they are community hubs and sanctuary spaces. It really is one of the few places in an increasingly monetized world where you can go and not have to make a purchase. You can go and not have someone giving you a side eye that if you're not leaving within half an hour. It's a place where, if you're a kid, you can go and do your homework if you don't have somewhere quiet to do it at home. You can go if you just need somewhere to hang out because it's raining and you can't go home yet until your mom's home from work. It's a place, if you're unhoused, you can get dry. If you're looking for a job, you can find job application help. It is a place for anybody who needs a place. And that is the thing, especially as an adult, I've really come to, feel very passionately about. And I know that libraries are at any point in time underfunded and fighting for recognition and fighting to not have their budgets slashed to nothing. And even in where I'd say not in the best of times in some ways, and, libraries are more under attack than ever in a lot of times and a lot of ways. So I think this book also came in a lot of ways out of my love for libraries and my hope that we will always continue to fight for them and continue to save them as the community spaces and resources and sanctuaries that they are.
Thank you. So, for those of us who are just stepping into the Astral Library because it just got published a couple days ago, what was the very first spark? Maybe an image or historical footnote, or maybe a character's voice that made you think this is my next novel?
Well, just for the elevator pitch, if you haven't, I had a chance to look at the inside jacket yet. It is a story of the Astral Library is I think of it as the ultimate library. It is a library that can open up from any existing library in the world, whether that is a grand castle-bound library hundreds of years old in Europe, or whether it is the McMurdo Library in Antarctica, or whether it is the little free library on your corner, or it is the most roach-infested, underfunded branch in the worst part of town that is somehow hanging on for its patrons. Any one of those real libraries can open a door to the Astral Library. And the Astral Library is the repository for all books, whether they've been written yet or not. And it is the place where bookworms who are lost and desperate can be offered a chance to escape into new lives inside their favorite books. And it really did begin for me with exactly that question, where at some point I'm just, walking the dogs or something like that, and it just popped into my head, what if you could live inside a book, your favorite book? You could go live in Pride and Prejudice. You could go live in Treasure Island. You could go live in Three Musketeers. What would that look like? What would it be like? And my imagination wouldn't let that idea go. And the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. And it kept growing on me. And at some point I thought, well, who knows? And I took it to my editor and my agent. And I honestly thought 50-50, they just shoot this down, because, publishers tend to get a little antsy if authors want to try something that is way outside their wheelhouse. But honestly, my editor and my agent both love the idea, and they're like, okay, it's different. But it's cool. We like this. Let's run with it. Let's see what we can do with it. And I'm really thankful that they did, because then I ended up thinking, well, I get to write this book now. And I ended up writing The Briar Club first, but I was all the time knowing I was going to come to this, and it kept kind of growing in the back of my head at the same time. And I was delighted when I got a chance to do it.
Thank you so much. Since we're in a library, we need to get a little bit curious about your research process for your writing. How do you approach it? And what's a surprising or little known detail that you uncovered in researching for this novel?
Well, my research for historical fiction is a little bit different. I mean, that's where, normally speaking, I will start with the historical record. It is the skeleton that you hang the whole rest of the story on. So I do a lot of deep dive into the history before I do anything else. And that's where I'm building what is going to be the timeline and the historical facts that I work with, the historical figures I'm working with. And then I layer the fictional on top of that once I have that skeleton in place. This was different. I mean, it was the fact that I had the freedom to really play, and I knew it was going to be bound by the real world on the outside, the modern world. So that was also something a little different for me. I've never written anything modern day set. But at the same time, I did still have these historical moments, because the thing is that one of the chases, my mother calls it, she says, every Kate Quinn book has the patented Act 3 chase. And I'm just like, you're not totally wrong. Now I feel seen. And there is a chase in this book. And this chase, though, given where it actually takes place, it goes from book to book to book, where the heroine ends up jumping from book to book to book. They call it margin traveling. You're going through the margins of the books from book to book. And I got to pick which books I wanted to have in there. And so I was looking for classics, and I was looking for books that were not just classics, but since I want this to not make anybody feel left out or make anyone who's reading it feel like I don't feel like I didn't read this book, so now I'm feeling dumb that I didn't, so then maybe I'll put it down. I wanted these to be books that were recognizable to as many people as possible. Books that are on reading lists, books that we've seen TV adaptations of, books that are in the national consciousness. So I was picking, and I wanted them to be books that I loved as well. So they're jumping from the Three Musketeers to Jane Eyre to Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. And so then I realized as soon as I jumped into each of these books, then there's The Great Gatsby. And it's like, as soon as I jumped in, I realized, well, I still need to get the history right, because each one of these books are taking place in an actual moment in the past. So there were two parts of research that went to each of those scenes, which would be, first of all, I'd have to haul out my book of The Great Gatsby or Jane Eyre, and I'm rereading the scene that they're jumping into. It's like, okay, how do they describe that drawing room in Jane Eyre? And what are the guests wearing? And what time is this taking place in? And okay, like what are the clothes looking like? And I guess what kind of hairstyle? That's an Apollo knot. Oh my God, that is the worst hairstyle ever. And I realized I still have to get the historical details right. So I'd have a chapter's worth of frenzied deep dive into the 1830s in Northern England for Jane Eyre. And then I would have another chapter's frenzied deep dive into The Great Gatsby in the early 20s in West Egg. And then I'm jumping to the 17th century and the world of D'Artagnan and the Three Musketeers. So I really box myself nicely into a corner here. So my very first fantasy and modern day set book, which is supposed to be, oh, great, I can just write it without researching. No, I got to do all the research for like 8 different eras.
So you spoke about fashion too. That's a really big aspect and feature in the book. Is that something that you bring personal passion from, or is that just an aspect or a part of the development of?
Well, I really love historical clothes. I think it's one of the reasons I love historical fiction is that you get to research the clothes and fantasize, dress your heroines and characters in the clothes and fantasize about wearing the clothes. And, which is why I never want to write any book that goes later than I'd say about mid 60s. Because if you ask me, clothes really go downhill after that. And I don't want to fantasize or research about bell bottoms or shoulder pads or anything along those lines. I want it to be clothes I'd actually want to wear. And so I enjoy a good makeover scene as much as anybody. And part of the world building for the Astral Library that I decided is that if you are equipping someone to go escape to live in another book, they're going to need to get a change of clothes to go there so they fit in. And so the Astral Library has a wardrobe department. And you will actually see quite early on, there's a little girl who comes in who's looking to escape from a very bad home life. And they ask her, what book do you want to live in? She wants to go live in Anne of Green Gables. So she gets off to the wardrobe department and she comes back. She's got a gingham pinafore and she's got her hair in braids and she's got those brass-toed boots and she's ready to go. And I thought I like that for a bit of world building. But also I thought I wanted to give my heroine, Alex, who is the newest patron for the library and very wide-eyed about it all, I wanted to give her an ally and a friend. And so I ended up with Bo, who is just about her only friend and who is a costume designer who owns a very lovely little costume shop on Newbury Street in Boston. And his specialty is historical fashion. And so he's the guy you would go to if you wanted a Galadriel costume for a Chi-Chi Halloween party. If you wanted to get a perfect, replica of a Marie Antoinette gown to wear to the Versailles ball and go through the Hall of Mirrors in, you would go to him. He would make you something that was absolutely true to history or whatever you wished. And he's a great designer. He's absolutely knows his period fashion. And I based him on the fact that I follow on Instagram a lot of these historical fashion designers and historical costumers. And I can't think of anything better. Follow a lot of them if you really want your feed to look a lot prettier and more smile-inducing. Because you have all these people who will just absolutely go gaga over spangled gauze and who will have beautiful videos showing, themselves sewing beads the size of protons onto spangled gauze and what's the stitching technique. And then you'll have them in these gorgeous outfits that they made themselves and that they will take pictures of. And it's just the prettiest, nicest, most, life-affirming thing ever. And it's people who are so involved in beauty and in, getting things right. And I understand the urge to get things right because, if you're a historical novelist, you're always trying to obsessing about the facts. Another site I follow is one called Frock Flicks, if anybody else does. And they are a wonderful group of historical costume nerds and seamstresses who run a site where they do nothing but snark the costumes in historical movies. They are hilarious. And I totally get, since I'm a person who also obsesses over details, I get it when I see them, writing all caps screeds about, oh my God, how do these movie makers not know that you don't have backlacing on 18th century dresses? These are front laced, people. I get it. They're very funny, and they have all these great pictures. And I thought Bo is going to be like that. And he's going to be the guy who loves historical fashion, and he's going to be the guy who's responsible for giving the heroine, who is a plus size girl who doesn't get a lot of great fashion moments. She's going to get them thanks to him. And I like the idea of gender flipping it. So for once, it's the guy who's the fashionista and not the girl. And so that we have an ally and a friend for her when she starts having her own adventures in her high chase through a variety of books. And I really had fun with that. And I had fun, sort of paying homage to just the costume nerds and the fashion nerds that I end up looking at, wasting quite a lot of time on, sometimes scrolling on Instagram, but it's pretty. And sometimes we just need something pretty or something funny. And I will say, if you go to Frockflix, you will not believe the fun they have with the new Wuthering Heights movie and the costumes in it.
Thank you so much. So Alex, wide-eyed, going on these adventures, she kind of thinks she's going to have an ally or a mentor in the librarian. Not so much. The librarian in this book, my goodness, what a strength and an indelible powerhouse of a character. If stories are living things and libraries are their sanctuaries, what does it mean to defend them? And who in the world are we defending them for?
Well, I knew from the beginning that if there's an Astral Library, there has to be a librarian who's its guardian. And that's librarian with a capital L. And she is a very fearsome woman indeed. And she looks like your absolute, stereotypical librarian. She's little. She wears a cardigan. She's got glasses. She's got a bun. And, she's got sensible shoes. And, but she's a lot more than that. And she's a lot more fearsome than that if she wishes to be. And she's the one who shepherds her patrons into the library. She's very no nonsense. And that's Alex, who is the heroine, who is the latest patron to come into this library. She is very much a book girl. She knows her book tropes. She knows the beats of the hero's journey before they even land. So she walks into here and is like, okay, call to adventure. Here I am. Where's the mentor? Where's the quest? Monologue time. It's like, she's seen this scene before. So it's the librarian's job to sort of knock her off her perch a little bit and be like, are you under the impression that you are the heroine and I am the wise old mentor whose job it is to wave you onto your quest? And she's like, well, yeah, kinda. And the librarian's like, you are one of many. I am here to help many, you among them. I will break things down for you for the rules, but I am not here to pat you on the head. I'm not here to stuff your rucksack for the road. I have a lot to do here, honey. And, because librarians are always overworked. So she's no nonsense. She is the mentor, but she's not the type to hold your hand throughout everything. And she definitely is one you want on your side in a fight, which is what the two of them have on their hands very quickly. Because Alex, who is a foster care kid who has come from the worst day of her life and has been finally offered this chance by coming into a magic library and having a chance to escape into a book life, she doesn't get that chance before something attacks the library, something shadowy. And she finds herself running in the librarian's wake as the librarian struggles to throw up defenses to protect those that the library has shielded. And her fight may be a little more astral than the average librarian's fight, but that really is what I tend to think librarians are for. And it is not only to be the person who explains where the bathrooms are. Yes, they're over there. This is where the quiet room is if you're crying. And this is when story hour is. But they're also the ones who do fight. They're the ones who are fighting for funding when somebody else is still suggesting, well, we can't afford those after school programs. They're the ones who are fighting for, no, we are not going to kick out the kids, we're not going to kick out the after school kids just because, yes, I know they're noisy. Yes, they have sticky fingers, but the library is also for them. And they're the ones who are fighting against the people who say things like, we think that there should be a lot fewer books in the library and there just need to be a lot more computers and things like that. And that, I think, is the fight that librarians have on their hands everywhere. And so my librarian has some of that fight on her hands as well, even though she also has something a bit more concrete to deal with as some very real physical dangers and magical ones start quite literally flying at her.
So, Kate, what was the most fun scene for you to write? Without giving away any spoilers, I apologize.
Well, I told her backstage because she's already read it, but I can't necessarily tell you, except I will just say it's the scene with the book dragon, because there is one.
So thinking about,
or actually, can I throw one more out there that I can give a little more? Another detail I threw in here is that I have a running joke with the fact that the Astral Library has ghosts. It is haunted. Mm-hmm. It has library ghosts, to be exact. And those ghosts are the departed souls of people who do not feel that they can pass on to the great beyond until they have finished their TBR.
There's a hope and space for all of us in limbo.
So periodically in the Astral Library, you'll come across in the stacks a book floating in midair and the page turning periodically. You might see an outline if you're looking hard enough in the sunlight, and that's a library ghost. And there's, who's trying to finish up, all the books that they didn't get a chance to read when they were alive. And there's one ghost in there who's been working for 50 years on War and Peace. But, it's the Astral Library. Time does not really pass there. So, he's got all the time he needs. And something tells me that a lot of people in this room are going to be library ghosts.
I think so too.
Probably I'll be right there with you.
So if the Astral Library were adapted for screen, who would you secretly cast for the librarian, Alex or Bo?
For Alex, I'd like an actress kind of like Nicola Coughlan from Bridgerton, because Alex is a plus size girl, and I want someone who's but she gets her fashion moment where she can burst out and show that she really is, it's okay. You can be plus size and be gorgeously dressed and absolutely steal the room. And Nicola Coughlan has a couple great moments like that in Bridgerton, which I always appreciated. And she has a great ability to have a great, even though she has this soft face, there's this bitterness in it sometimes. And Alex is a girl with a lot of bitterness because she's a girl who's been abandoned. She's more or less orphaned. She's aged out of the foster care system. She has no family network, no social network, really no friends. She's part of the, working poor who are, cobbling together an existence, with 3 jobs, none of which pay enough, can never quite pay all your bills on time. And it's a really hard life and living paycheck to paycheck. And she has a lot of bitterness, and books are the only thing that she has that gives her joy. And so I would like an actress who can play that bitter edge, but one with humor as well, because Alex does still have a sense of humor, even if there's an edge to it. So I think someone like along Nicola Coughlan's lines would be good. For the librarian, I don't often have an actress in my head or an actor while I'm writing, but for her, I actually did. And the one I was thinking of was the Iranian actress named Shora Aghdashloo, who is, if anybody else has watched The Expanse, she plays Avasarala from the Expanse novels. She is this marvelously acerbic Middle Eastern actress with this wonderfully smoky, sarcastic voice. And I heard that voice when I was hearing the librarian's dialogue, and I could absolutely picture her as the librarian in a heartbeat. So I even told my book narrator when she was trying to put the voices together, it's like, this is the actress I had in mind. You can find clips of her, and this is what she sounds like. And she was also the voice of the dragon in that Millie Bobby Brown movie called Damsel, which had a very smoky voice on a female dragon, which is very shiver-inducing. So that's who I picked for that. And then for Bo, the closest I could find was there's a wonderful actor who played Jesper in the Shadow and Bone miniseries, which was by Lee Bardugo, I think it was. And but yeah, he was the gunslinger in that. But he's very stylish, and he always a hat that's always cocked over his head, just so. And he's got a very devilish grin, and he knows his way around a sword. And I think that would work very well for Bo.
Thank you. My last question for you is how does Astral Library fit into your evolution as a storyteller? What do you hope that we readers feel when we close the book?
Well, the primary thing I hope for anyone who finishes any book of mine is, first of all, I hope you were entertained, because it is the first and foremost job of any storyteller to entertain. And I want you to walk away, having the feeling that, you have not wasted your time, you've enjoyed your time in those pages, and you've taken something from it. I would say, though, that coming back to what I said at the beginning, that I hope you have, an even greater love for your own library and, your own librarians and the work they do, and, the urge to fight for them if they need it. And, most libraries do need it. So I would say go back to, what was said at the beginning in the housekeeping, and go donate to your local library, and you can find the buttons on the website.
Thank you so much. Do we have time for one more? Okay. I guess for the writers in our audience, which I know there are quite a few, is there a piece of advice that you've been given about your craft that you'd want to share with us?
Well, I would say that it really comes down to, I think you need to give yourself permission to be bad. And to unpack that a little bit, is that I see many new writers who get so discouraged by how rough their own prose is when they look at it. They look at it and they're like, oh my God, this is so terrible. I could never show this to anyone. What was I doing thinking I could write a book? It's like, you need to shut that voice down by any means necessary. And you need to give yourself permission to be bad and just finish it. Whatever it is, if it's a poem, if it's a short story, if it's a novel, you just need to put your butt in the chair and finish it, however that needs to get done. Because if you don't have something that's finished, you'll never get anywhere. And so it's okay. And you need to be okay with the idea that your first draft will be terrible. It's all right. My first drafts are terrible. Every writer I know, their first drafts are terrible, and they will tell you that. And, of course, if we ever say this online, there'll be some guy on X or Twitter who says, well, actually, my first drafts are great. And it's like, okay, guy on Twitter, you're the exception. That's amazing. The rest of us are mere mortals, and our first drafts are terrible. But that's all right. And that kind of leads to the second bit of advice that's related to it, which is, I don't know who said this originally. I've heard it attributed to everyone from Jodi Picoult to Nora Roberts. But it is the idea that, what was it? How did she put it? I can edit a bad page. I cannot edit a blank page. So get that first draft down. It doesn't matter if it sucks. I guarantee you it probably will, but you can fix it later. So get it down and then fix it later. And whatever you need to do to sort of silence that internal voice, just silence it however you need to. And so you can actually work, because you will get better and better at fixing your own work. I promise. I mean, it's just a matter of practice and, trial and error and doing all the things that, you have to do to get done. And I know this because I'm more or less an entirely self-taught author. I started really young. My mom told me it was that whole thing about you put 10,000 hours in before you can consider you're good at something. I started my 10,000 hours really early. But, it's like you have to put in the wrench time to teach yourself how to get better. So it is going to be a little discouraging. But if you don't finish things and give yourself the opportunity to try to learn how to fix yourself and fix your own work, you're never going to get anywhere. So that's my best advice as far as I can put out.
Thank you. Lynn, do we want to do some questions from the audience? Would that be great?
Or did we finish early? I can't remember when we started.
No,
I was having too much fun.
Timelessness here in the Astral Library. I think we have time for a number, maybe 2 or 3 questions.
Yeah.
Is it me right now? Hi. Hi, sorry. So you had talked earlier about diving into like a new genre and how you still got to do a lot of the history work behind that. Once you finished this book, did you see yourself diving more into different genres or kind of going back to historical fiction?
A little bit of both. My next novel after this is going to be straight historical fiction. And I've actually already finished that. I finished that like 2 weeks before I came on book tour. I was so thrilled. And because now I can be away from it while I'm on the road, and I can, I can have, when I come back, I'll be able to address it with fresh eyes, and I can start editing. That one, just in case you're interested, that has working title of The Woman on the Mountain, and that's going to come out probably next summer. So that's going to be straight historical fiction. But the one after that, I really don't know. And it kind of depends on, honestly, it depends on how this one does. I mean, do I have other ideas that maybe have some magical or fantasy elements in them? Sure. If this one, absolutely sinks like a stone and is the worst decision I ever made as an author to try to put out there, then I might not do any more fantasy element stuff, because I also have to think about what is going to keep my dogs in kibble and what is going to keep the lights on. These are the decisions that have to factor in when you're deciding what to write next. If you're making the decision as a professional and not just writing the book of your heart for fun. But I do have some more. I don't think I'm ever leaving historical fiction behind. It is too much, I think, the first and foremost love that I have when it comes to writing. But I do like crossover into some other speculative or fantastical elements. I did a little bit of that with the Amazon original short story I did called Signal Moon. I did that a little bit with the Briar Club with the Sentient House, and I really crossed over all the way into this one here. So keep playing with that world, that idea in that world, maybe eventually. I'd like to, but we'll have to see how it goes. So sorry, there's no decision yet. It's really going to depend how this book does and what the next couple of years have in store, and what else I write in the meantime.
Just one over here. All right. Hands down, what is your all-time favorite book that you have ever read in your entire life?
Oh, God, I can't answer that because I have too many. It's just because there's too many genres, there's too many authors, and what am I in the mood for? And I can't answer that. I'm sorry. Plus top three. Oh, boy. Well, okay, I can give you some at least that were starting books that kind of hooked me on historical fiction. And that was, let's see, The Oracle Glass by Judith Merkel Riley, which I love all of her work. That one I think was my favorite, but she was the one who wrote historical fiction that was so beautifully realized and so rich. And it always was resourceful women who were somehow completely of their time period, but still managing to be smart and work within the system to get what they wanted. And I love that. And she often did also have fantasy elements, and she also had humor. I think a lot of historical fiction could be deadly serious. It's a very serious genre. And she really showed me that it could be funny. And I read her as a teenager and I loved her work. So Judith Merkel Riley, The Oracle Glass, that was that one. Bernard Cornwell, especially his King Arthur trilogy, which is very historical and gritty and real life based, but it is just no one better at Blood and Battle. And just I weep hopelessly every time I come to the end of that trilogy, every single time. So it still has that power over me. And the late, great Eva Ibbotson, who wrote some of the best historical romance I've ever read. And her prose is just so incredibly beautiful and so inventive and so poetic. And again, so much humor. Medensky Square was my favorite one of hers. So those were three authors and their books they're my favorite in their books, who are very seminal for the work that I ended up kind of thinking that's the kind of thing I want to write. So I hope that helps.
I have a question regarding younger readers. Sometimes we run into educators who say that younger readers we shouldn't be assigning them classic literature because they won't read it and it's not relevant anyway. So I was just wondering what you think about that.
I think it's about making books accessible. And I think it is about, I do believe very much that children are made readers on the laps of their parents or on the laps of somebody. I mean, it takes an adult often getting them into books. That's how I got there, because my father read to me before I even knew how to read. And that was how, by the time I learned to read, I already knew why I wanted to, because I loved stories. And I think that's an advantage that I had that I know that many kids do not. So it's a complicated topic, because I don't ever want to shame kids for what they read if they're reading. If they're reading manga, great. If they're reading The Hunger Games and they just want to read dystopian stuff, it's okay, they're reading. Is it good? Is it getting them into the idea that stories are fun? It's that's good. I think there can be ways to And it often falls back on teachers, unfortunately. But the best teachers can teach things in a way, classics in a way that make them relevant. And that is the best kind of teacher of all. And I know that that's not always the teacher that kids are fortunate enough to have, but I think it can be a struggle making the classics relevant. But I think there has to be a real effort to try if you're going to try to bring the classics into kids' lives in a way that they'll like. I mean, watching a movie or a taped play of a Shakespeare play can often be a revelation for a kid because Shakespeare needs to be spoken and suddenly you're understanding it. Whereas on the page, you're like, what the hell is this? But you hear someone speak it who knows how to speak it, then you suddenly, light dawns. I think sometimes it needs to be a willingness to get down and dirty with it. I remember I had a good English teacher who spent a lot of time on Shakespeare with dialogue, with vocabulary sheets, explaining all the dirty jokes. Once they understood how many dirty jokes are in Shakespeare, they were a lot more interested. So I think whatever you can do to make it accessible is what you got to do. And I know that's hard, and I know you're not going to succeed with everyone. So yeah, it's a battle. I know it is. But I think what it comes down to is I'd rather see kids reading almost anything than see them not reading at all. So if they're willing to get started with, something that you're thinking, well, but why are you reading that when you could be reading this? At least they're reading.
I have a question right here in the middle.
Okay, so a few questions ago, you talked about how one of your favorite authors wrote such good, strong female characters in the books and relevant. Well, I personally think that you are the master of that. So I would like to know, do you have a favorite character, or do you have some characters that are near and dear to your heart that you still think about, or that you've written? Yeah.
Oh, I do. And that's really because all my characters keep living in my head after the book is done. So, I could tell you anybody, it's like, oh yeah, I know what happens to them, and I know how old they live to be, and I know how many kids they have. And, it's like this continues on in my head, but it's just all the characters. I just know how their lives go because they kept living. And, so all of them do. And I kind of know where they all end up. But it is true that some do definitely sort of come to life in an even more violent way than others. It depends on the character. You can never predict who it's going to be or which book it's going to be. I remember, for example, when I wrote The Huntress, writing Mina was a whirlwind. She came to life so hard. She barnstormed right out of my brain so fast that it was less like I was writing her adventure than it was just she was living her life at top speed and yelling over her shoulder at me, in Russian to keep up. So that's great when that happens. I'm just along for the ride. It was fantastic. In another way, I remember Eve from the Alice Network also grabbed me really hard, but kind of in a different way because she was very secretive with me. Like, because she was a spy, and, spies play their cards close to their vest, that, I couldn't figure out a lot of the time, what are you up to? It's like, I know you're doing this, and I know broad stroke why you're doing it because I plotted it that way, but I felt like she was keeping things from me, even as I was writing her story. And people have asked me, it's like, you implied that, the book covers her spy work during World War I, but you imply that she was involved in some way in spy work in World War II as well. So what was that? So like, why didn't we figure that out? What was that? And I was just like, well, I'd love to tell you, but she hasn't told me. So I sometimes think it's like, are you ever going to write a sequel about maybe like Eve's spy work in World War II? And it's like, well, yeah, if she ever gets drunk and opens up one night and lets me know what she did, maybe I will. And that would be fun, but she hasn't unfolded that yet. So I would certainly be interested to know, but I don't know yet. So there's a couple like that. And then I think most characters, I spend a lot of time getting to know them before I start writing them. I try to figure out, like what's not just like, what do you look like, but what's your background? What's your family? What do you like? What do you swear when you drop a hammer on your foot? What do you like to relax with? What are your things you're good at, the things you're bad at, the things that, the wound that you're hiding? What's the belief that you have that's holding you back that needs to change? I try to figure all of those things out before I start writing, but I don't always get it right, because the characters change when they're on the page, and they sometimes surprise me, and that's fun. I mean, when they do that, I go with it, because I don't always get it right in the plotting process. It's kind of like that whole saying, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. No outline survives first contact with the drafting process.
All right, we do need to wrap it up there, but let's give him another warm round of applause.
So just one last thing before we say adieu to you, Kate. I wondered if you would help me read these 2 pages. Okay. Shall we? Okay. Shh.
If you want to know what those 2 pages are, it is page 158 and 159. And you'll realize exactly why we read it the way we did.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all again so much for coming out. What we're going to do now is, if you have your signed book and you don't need to get a picture with Kate, we're going to have you exit out the doors over here to what is your right, my left. If you would like to get a photo with Kate, we'll have you exit out these back doors, but don't stand up yet. If you would like a photo, we will let you know, but we'll go out these back doors. The photo will need to be on your phone, so if you can have that ready to go for us. We do so appreciate the library letting us use this space, and they let us use it at no charge, which is very helpful, but it does mean we want to respect their time, and so we do need to be out of here by 8 p.m. So if we feel like we're rushing you through the line, we might be a little bit. But we thank you all again so much. Please give us a minute. We're going to get Kate settled, and then Erin in the back there in the pink, she will let you know when you can start leaving for photos. Thank you all so much.